Hi, everybody. Welcome to the You Are Inevitable Limited Season 2 podcast, where we dive deep into your inner resources and help you tap into those inner resources. Here you are with Kathleen, me, Kathleen Seeley, Natalie, Alexia. With we call ourselves two very seasoned coaches with 6 decades of experience. That's a way of saying that we earned the gray. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So what we're here to do is have, as you know, disruptive, unscripted conversations. We choose topics and then just see where they go. And we hope to leave you with a renewed sense of confidence and self-awareness, because we want to always remind you, you are the architect of your own life. And with the right tools and mindset, you are indeed inevitable. Now, if you want to comment or ask questions, feel free. If you're one of the many people who listen to the recording, we actually have more than 650 people signed up for this podcast. So what would be delightful if you'd like it, if you'd subscribe, if you'd share, leave us a review. That helps us reach more people. That would be awesome. So today, our topic is living with uncertainty and the power of vulnerability. I mean, what's true is the future is unknown. It is inherently uncertain. We can't predict the future. Possibly some people have those psychic powers. I can't say that I do. And so therefore, not knowing the future, we're exposing ourselves to a certain level of risk or uncertainty. I remember one of the people I follow is Pema Chodron, and she says, the rug is always about to be pulled out from under you. And that's just, for me, that just feels what's true. And we often have this illusion of control, and it might serve us all to just practice letting that go a little bit. So that's what we're talking about, Natalie. What do you got to say about that?
Yeah, well, I'm excited that we get to dive into this topic around uncertainty and vulnerability and how the two things are connected, because I do think they're interconnected. And I love the phrase, the illusion. I both love and hate the phrase, the illusion of control, because as a recovering control freak, I think I like to imagine that everything secretly is under my control. And I think it's very interesting to explore this idea, the illusion of control. I think I remember feeling quite reflective about that actually during the pandemic when that first happened, because I think that it was a very interesting global pattern interrupt, because here we all were imagining that there were these aspects of our life that were certain and in our control, such as leaving our home, going to the grocery store, maybe our children going to school, going to an office, and suddenly this out of the blue, as I experienced it, thing happened. And I think it had this interesting impact on our relationship with control and certainty. And I believe that many of us found ourselves reflecting on things like, what is actually important in my life? How do I actually want to spend my time? And that created a lot of shifts for us. So I'm definitely interested to explore that with you today.
Me too. Yeah. I actually love the pandemic, and my son Carson and I both said to each other, what does it say about your social life when a global pandemic doesn't affect it? But anyway, today, the embracing uncertainty and authenticity is really, and we'd love to hear your comments in the chat too, those of you who are here live today, but it's really about leaning into the unknown, and nothing is really known. And I have this saying that I haven't actually thought of it for a long time, but I was sharing a blog with somebody that I wrote a long time ago. And on the blog, it says, please don't love your familiar zone so much that you forget the truth about it. And we keep ourselves safe. It's natural. Our brains want to be safe. You can talk about that a little bit. That's your kind of area of expertise. But we want to be safe. So our natural reaction is to resist uncertainty or to stick with patterns that we know. And we might do that with us being uncomfortable, but it's familiar. And anyone who's been around me knows that I talk about comfort zones, but I don't really think they're comfort zones. They're familiar zones. They're familiar. They're not necessarily comfortable. So today is about questioning your familiar zone and not love it so much you forget the truth about it. I've had lots of experiences in my life where I've leaned into the uncertainty, and I too would say, I really like the illusion of control. It makes me feel super safe. But what I know for sure is the last few years of my life have been completely uncertain and the most exciting, stressful ride I think I can remember. So I have realized, no, we actually have no control. And, when we're faced with things that are unexpected, if we long so much for certainty, like, for example, try to control so many things around us in our life, we might miss opportunities that lie outside of our vision. It's like those horses that they put those blinders on so they don't see things to spook them. I'm assuming that's what they're for. I don't know. I just made that up. But we do that, and we say we're so singularly focused on what we need to achieve or what's possible, we might miss out on these opportunities. And one thing that really I'm reminded of is when I first started working with Jack Canfield. I had never read a chicken book. I had never the success principles. I just sort of fell into it. And then every step along the way of my 13-year relationship with Jack, where I actually became a business partner and designed his train the trainer programs. I got to speak on a stage and teach with him. And it's been a really wild, beautiful ride that I had never thought would happen. And me wanting to be a good performer, if I let my fear of not being in control or my fear of taking a risk take over, none of these beautiful things would happen in my life. So I made this decision a long time ago. This is not my quote. I stole it from someone and I can't remember who, but to just live my life sort of more curious than afraid. So that's what we're looking at here with uncertainty and vulnerability. They go together in a way that in order to lean into uncertainty, we have to expose ourselves to a certain level of vulnerability and accept that we don't really have a lot of control. And that's the beautiful thing. So Natalie, I talked a little bit about my work with Jack being kind of a surprise and uncertain and stressful a lot of the time, but the most beautiful thing I've done in my life. Can you share a time or a story about where you embraced something that you didn't even plan for and it had a beautiful outcome?
Yeah, I think when I started working with you, Kathleen, and I first learned about the values, I just want to say, I remember, I think it's when I did my first ever values assessment with you, and I picked ease with uncertainty. And I pretty much always pick ease with uncertainty. Like my values, when I go through, I've done many assessments over periods of time, and there are a few that will always stay consistent for me, and it's ease with uncertainty and humor and fun. And I personally think that those two things are sort of related. There's some aspect of like, I don't know, like laughing at the absurdity of life as it unfolds before you, or at least trying to, even when that doesn't feel easy. And I would say my life has been one of uncertainty and like extremely high levels of change. So some of you know this about me, some of you don't, but my parents moved all over the world when I was a kid. I went to 11 different schools. I've lived in 6 different countries on 3 different continents. And actually, my zone of familiarity I realized at some point, had been change more than stability. And actually change could end up looking like chaos instead of stability. So that's something that I had to work through, because I got to a point in my life where I was like, yeah, I definitely am over this feeling of everything being chaotic. And I want to expand my zone of familiarity to experiencing more stability and more peace. I do have a story, but I don't know if you had something to say, because I saw you noting something down.
No, I that's for later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So my story is, like, I was trying to think of a specific example, and Kathleen and I met 10 years ago when I went to train the trainer with Jack Canfield, and Kathleen was a teacher at Train the Trainer, and that was a year-long experience at that time when I did it. And I came up during that experience. I had been into like spiritual work and human potential. I was already a coach and like very passionate about these things, but I'd never been amongst other people who shared my passion. And I went from feeling like always the strange person in a conversation trying to bring these things up to really being able to share in a rich way with other people who shared this passion. And so after I came away from the first meeting, I was like, I want to come up with a gift for these people. I don't know why I thought that. And I ended up creating a project. Some of you may know about it. Some of you may have seen it. It was called Love is the New Black. But ultimately, I asked everyone who was part of my training, if you had a message that you could share with the world and you could guarantee that every single person would hear and understand you, what would you say? And then I wrote their answers on their bodies in marker and photographed them in black and white. I only ever intended to do it that one time. There was no grand master plan behind it. It was a thing to share with my cohort. And after our final session together with Train the Trainer, I put all of the pictures together into a slideshow and asked permission, would I be able to share them with the group? And I set them to music and shared them. And I sort of was just hoping that everyone would like it. I was not expecting the reaction in the room, which was very palpable. Some people got very emotional and some people, lots of people were smiling. And Jack came up to me after we had shared that and said, I would love for you to come and do this at the Transformational Leadership Council, which is something that he'd spoken about during our training of this group of his peers that got together. And I just remember thinking, no. That's all inside. I was just thinking, no, no, I'm not enough. What would I say? What would I do? All of these people, some of them who I knew were a part of it, books I'd read over the years, people I looked up to. And actually, Patty Aubrey, the president of Jack's company, was standing next to him. And I think I may have just had my chin. And she said, just say yes. And I went, I think I just nodded. But that entire project became this incredible leaning into uncertainty. It was 100% not a plan. I did go to the Transformational Leadership Council with Jack. I spoke and I took everybody's photographs, did the same thing. And then for 18 months, every time I did that, the Transformational Leadership Council was the first one, someone would ask me to come and do it somewhere else. And I ended up speaking at all these different events all over the world. I personally photographed 5,000 people. I got really passionate about having diversity in the project. I spent a day on Skid Row in Los Angeles photographing homeless people. I'd photographed, millionaires, homeless people, people from over 40 different countries, people of all different religious backgrounds, political beliefs. And there started to be this synergy in the messages that people would share over and over again. And by some, I to this day don't know quite how it came about. I ended up launching it with the United Nations on International Day of Peace. We had over 35,000 people share their messages over about a 5-day period. And we had an estimated reach of about 400 million people with that project. And during the time of doing that, I constantly had this feeling of, what the hell am I doing? Where the hell is this going? And who the hell am I to do this? And I remember during that time period thinking, I just have to keep saying yes. And I also had this thing going where I would try and do something every day that made me feel really uncomfortable in connection with the project. And so it was a hugely uncertain time and a hugely uncertain thing. But it really was something that I feel tremendously proud of now, and also that had such an impact on so many people's lives.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is, of course, it was unplanned, unknown. You traveled to places, you said yes to people you'd never met before. And I almost got this sense, we were telling the story, there's still a part of you that might not have been willing to show the vulnerability side of it, or the I'm scared side of it, or the authenticity of, wow, this is big. And I don't know, I'm making that up because I'm thinking about when Jack had first asked me, I was talking about coaching and how I'm passionate about coaching. And he's like, well, why don't you teach a section on coaching to the Train the Trainer group? I'm like, sure, never willing to tell him I'm scared, I'm nervous, I don't speak on stages. I just was I wasn't whole. I feel like I wasn't whole in the uncertainty. I was really trying to be like, I got this locked down. I got this together. I can do anything. And then one time I was speaking, he then told me, if you want to teach the passion test, do it. And I was teaching it. And I remember at the break, I was so anxious about it because I was nervous. It was in front of a big group. And I went to the back table, wanting him to tell me I was doing good. And he's like, you need to do this. You need to do that. You got to. So it just rocked me. And I had to kind of get my ground back. And Jack's not a mean person. He gives great feedback, but I wasn't in the frame of mind where I wanted to admit that things weren't good. So it was really in that moment, as I reflect back on it, what would have worked better for me to say is, Jack, I'm really nervous right now. What would really be helpful for me is tell me 3 things I'm doing well. Like be more open and more authentic and more vulnerable to this exciting moment. And I think that, and I'm not projecting onto you that you felt that way, that you had to look like you had it locked in, but I don't know anybody out there in listening land, when you try something new, or the first time you speak, or you're a coach, or most of the people that follow this are coaches or trainers, but when you try something new, are you sort of wearing this mask that I better look like I have it all together? I don't know if I'm the only one, but anyway, this just occurred to me. It just came to me.
You are not projecting. You are 100% on the money. Mm-hmm. And the question that's coming to me is, that is a you question. Like, what does it cost you to act like you know?
Yeah.
And absolutely, like I felt like I had to pretend that I knew what I was doing, and I couldn't let anyone see that I had no idea what I was doing. And I was completely making it up as I went along. And I think the other thing about that experience for me as well is that I was so uncomfortable. I don't quite know how to describe it, but what I reflected on after the event is I wanted so much to make it about the message. And even in like giving it a name, like there was this desire at the time to separate myself from it. Like it wasn't about me. Like I had to be in the background. Like I am just the messenger, if you like. And I think, of course, like there's some aspect of that. There's some parts of that are true. And then what's really true is that I was terrified of being central to this thing that was happening, and I was terrified of it being about me, because I had so much of like, you know, who am I? Why the hell am I here? Like all of these you know, doubts about my own worth, ability, you know, why have I been given this opportunity kind of feeling. And I think what's true is I would manage it differently today, because it was 10 years ago. And like everyone else, you know, I've grown through that and many other experiences that I've had. And I think you're right. I think I would be so much more vulnerable today. And I actually think, you know, I don't have regrets specifically about this, but I think that what's probably true is if I had been more vulnerable about this, potentially I would have gotten more input from people. Like I probably could have taken it in different directions.
And maybe more of an authentic presence. Right?
Oh, 100%.
And that's interesting, because I think we grow into our possibility. And I was listening to this podcast this morning on my walk, and that's what got me thinking about this masks. You know, this person was talking about masks that we wear, you know, in this room and with that group and this, and that it's not our real selves. And I actually think that's bullshit, to be honest, because I don't know as we necessarily wear a mask. I think that's a phrase that's useful, but I think we enable the identity that's in ourselves to show up that feels safe in the context. And we have all these parts in ourselves that, well, in this context, I need to, you know, wear this mask. And I would prefer to call it, this identity is what fits here most. And this identity, I'm speaking on a stage at the UN. This identity is the one I need to bring. And the older I've gotten and the more experience I've had of being, you know, having super disastrous moments on stage and brilliant moments on stage, and it could be in the same talk, are when I've become more comfortable not knowing, like I know my beginning, middle, and end, and unknowing what's going to happen in the middle, being more sort of engaging with the audience, even in a coaching conversation, just letting go of where I think it needs to go and feel my way through it and allow the part of me to show up that needs to show up in that moment. And I've become more confident in that. And I think that that's, as you know, 10 years ago, you said you would have done this, and now, you know, you might show up differently, but it was absolutely perfect then, because it was perfect then, because that's what it was. And so I'm thinking about, it's not, rather than, to me, mask has like a negative connotation, and maybe it doesn't tell you, but it's like, rather, that's the identity that showed up that my nervous system and my brain and my self-concept needed to feel safe and to sort of be effective in that context. And the more we let go of knowing how something's going to end, I think the more we open ourselves up to learning and a richer, more authentic experience. And that's what I think is the connection between the sort of the ease with uncertainty and authenticity and vulnerability. I'm almost seeing it as a trifecta in some way. I don't know, triangle. But how, when I really became more confident in my relationship with Jack, I would say to him, I'm really nervous about this, or I don't know how this is going to go. And he just completely shifted the way he coached me. It was incredible. I was able to ask and be honest and say, I don't know how to do this, or I've never done this before. And when I had presented to him as this real confident person who knew it, so he thought, well, I'm just going to tell her these 5 things she could do differently. And I look back at that and I go, I needed that, because I needed to recognize the more authentic I am, the faster I grew with his mentoring and coaching. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like think about in like the leadership space, or when we're leading into an uncertain future, which it is uncertain, how can we, as leaders, anyone out there who's a leader, a coach, a parent, I don't know, a baseball coach, anything, but we don't know what's going to come. So how can we open ourselves up to still have the sort of what's needed as a leader, which is called followers, but also saying to the team or whoever you're leading, I don't have all the answers, but collectively, I really think we can get there together. How can we harness the collective intelligence of all the brilliant people in this room? And it's not as a leader saying, I don't know what I'm doing. It's more, wow, we've got some things ahead of us that are uncertain. I'm going to be open with you that this is unfamiliar to me, but I know collectively we can find our way. And that's how we can engender more safety, a willingness to be authentic and vulnerable in uncertainty.
I think what was coming up for me as you were talking about that is really, over the years, I think what I have learned is that vulnerability is a superpower, like almost is how I feel about it. And I think that just to contextualize vulnerability, to me, vulnerability is not emotionally dumping on others. It is not blurting out everything that I feel and everything that I'm afraid of in every given moment. But I do think that vulnerability is this ability to be real and honest with what is. And certainly in the leadership capacity, like what you're talking about, I think in my experience, vulnerability makes things function better. So like, even as we reflect on, of course, like what you were saying about Jack and the type of feedback that he gave you, when you were then able to be more real in the moment and say, actually, I don't know how this is going to go, or I'm very nervous. It impacts the situation in a positive way. Reflecting on my experience and thinking, holy crap, if I had been able to be vulnerable in that, it probably would have, impacted that experience differently. And I think in intimate relationships, in friendships, and definitely in leadership, this ability to be vulnerable, Philip's saying, is being real and present, as opposed to thinking that as the leader, I have to have all the answers. Right. As I think about that, I think that's a very old school way of leading, whether you're, and let's just say that leadership is happening with and without a title, whether you are in a leadership position in a corporate context, or even, use the example of parent. I think as parents often, and I'm in the active process of parenting teenagers, I notice that a lot of the parents around us feel like they have to have all the answers, and also this feeling that I am right, and I am not open to being vulnerable. I'm not even open to admitting the vulnerability of perhaps sometimes I could be wrong, or perhaps sometimes I could expand my definition of what it is that I'm thinking about.
Okay, I'm cracking up because that reminds me of with my kids when they were younger. There is we train them also to think that we have all the answers. I mean, we just set ourselves up for, as Pema would say, setting the target up for the arrow. But my kids would ask me a question. I remember Carson would do this. Mom, he'd ask me a question and I'd say, well, I don't know. He's like, well, what do you what do you think? Or what is this? Or what is that? He keep asking the same question. And I say, okay, I don't know the answer, but do you want me to make one up so you feel better? And he'd say yes. Right? Because our brain needs stories to cope with what's happening in our world, to keep us safe. And we have to give meaning to things. We need to put it in a box. From a very young age, we learn that the answer is more important. And now what I've learned is the question matters more. Like leaving a coaching client with really good questions that don't need to be answers, that just sort of sit and are unexpected. Or me leaving a conversation saying, wow, I wonder what that means to the way I see the world now. And that comes with an increased comfort in uncertainty, and increased, and as a leader, parent, whatever, blah, 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 leader, parent, leader without a title. But it's being able to know who I am, which is why we do the values work, but I know who I am, but I'm also okay with holding space for uncertainty, with the opening to maybe learn something new. Mm-hmm. And I can hold contrary opinions. I can hold space for differences, where we go beyond 1 + 1 = 2. And the more important question is 1 + 1 what? That becomes more interesting to me now that I feel more competent to float through uncertainty. And Natalie, I think it would be good if you could give a little bit of meat on the bones of our brain and our nervous system and what happens when it feels uncertain, because I think that's useful information.
Yeah, I agree. I think so when we feel uncertain about something, I would say it is often, not always, often correlated with stress. So I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know how I'm going to figure this out. And that could be any problem, problem at work, problem at home, problem in your relationship, anywhere. So this feeling of, I would describe it as, oh shit. Yeah. Stress happens. And so we talked about this in one of the other podcast episodes, but when our stress response fires, our nervous system is always moving in waves throughout the whole day. That's what it's designed to do. It's not designed to flatline at rest or homeostasis, because we need to mobilize, we need to be in action. So it goes in waves. So we have everything from flat homeostasis to fight, flight, freeze, fawn, highly activated response. So depending on the level of stress that you associate with this, when we are stressed and our nervous system is activated, we go into these responses, fight, flight, freeze, and we lose access to our prefrontal cortex. So the critical thinking part of our brain, the part of our brain that is a problem solver, the part of our brain where compassion lives, creativity lives, our ability to relate to others lives, because our body is flooding with adrenaline, with cortisol, and we are trying to figure out from this very unhelpful place in the brain, how do we move forward? So I think that's interesting to know as we contemplate the fact that uncertainty is real and alive, as we've spoken about, in all of our lives, all of the time. And just to notice what is going on in the body when uncertainty is alive. Mm-hmm. Because if we can take a beat when we think, oh my God, oh shit, that moment, I don't know how I'm going to resolve this. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening. If we can take a beat, notice what's happening in our body, maybe take a breath, maybe connect, notice what's around you, and bring yourself even slightly down from the peak of your nervous system activation, you begin physiologically to get back into that place where creativity is available to you, problem solving is available to you, compassion is available to you, all of these things. And I think it's interesting when we think about that in terms of how uncertainty can often be a precursor to conflict, and how the conflict can occur, again, personal relationships, work relationships. And imagine two people in conflict, whether they are trying to resolve an issue, problem solve an issue with good intentions, but everybody's nervous system is up here, and everything good that would help them is not accessible in the same way. And how contrary that is to our ability to be able to problem solve, resolve conflict, whether that's within ourselves or with another.
Yeah. I had this, this is a long time ago, but because I do lots of work in the corporate space, and leaders, we run through life with this lie, thinking we have to know it all, and there's one single right answer and all that kind of stuff, and opening up the dialogue that you couldn't possibly know it all. And I've shared this before on a podcast, probably, but I came to this thing I say in my head is, if I bump up against something I don't know, I say to myself, well, how could I know until I know? And that's just, it's so simple. But to me, it's like, yeah, how could I know this? I don't know this yet. And now I do. And I also learned to give that grace to others, because the frustration I used to feel if people weren't getting it, or buying what I'm sharing with them, or following the script that they're supposed to follow as I'm their trainer. And by day 3, you should be crying and thanking me for this incredible experience. But just give that grace to myself and others. Like, how could they know this? Like, I remember, many of us come from the Jack world, and the formula E plus R equals O, event plus response equals outcome. I was introduced to that 30 years ago. It was event plus stimulus equals response. So by it's just a different framing with Will Schutz. And until I was able to see that we have no control, and then we have control. Our control lies in our response. And when you talk about our nervous system being ignited in a way that we go to that sort of protection, because we're designed to protect ourselves, and to take a deep breath and go, oh, I'm safe. I'm just learning something new. Or, oh, I'm safe. This person just doesn't agree with me. Or, oh, I'm safe. I just didn't know that. Or, being able to say to Jack, like, I'm like really nervous today. Tell me something I want to hear, not something I need to hear. And we just developed a relationship like that. And I feel like we collectively as a team have come to that space where we can also be like, you've shared things with me that I didn't know about you, that you said, I won't share them because it's not my place to share, that you'd say, I just had so much shame around that. And I also have things where I feel shameful about, but the more I open up about them, the more depth our relationship has, and we can navigate together. And those are my life passion, or life purpose, is to really create spaces where people feel like they can not know, and they can feel safe enough to learn. A team that can learn together are the strongest teams. They're the most agile. They're the most innovative. They have the most fun. They have the most compassion. But how do you get people to a place of all that stuff you learned growing up, that there's a single right answer, and the leader's the boss, and they need to know everything, silos, directly reporting up instead of more collective consciousness or collective intelligence of the group. We have to unlearn all that and then figure out how to learn together. I feel like our team really does that. We're small, of course, which heat can show up quicker, and then resolution can make magic quicker as well. But that's sort of my I think that I would call that really the purpose of my work, is to make people feel safe in their not knowing, and a passion for learning and understanding themselves. Because you can't solve a problem unless you're first willing to be part of it. And the only way to, another quote is, the truth shall set you free, but not till it's had its way with you. And the hardest truth to tell is one to ourselves, to say, oh, I acted like an ass, or I was really scared and I didn't acknowledge it, or I acknowledged it and that felt good. Or there might be times where we acknowledge it, we feel nervous and vulnerable, and people are like, yeah, well, you shouldn't be here then. Like, I've had people like super critical of me after speaking, say really unkind things that, of course, 5-10 years ago, I'm like, oh my God, like they would be sticky like Velcro. Maybe less so now, because I've become more comfortable with not knowing, and comfortable not being perfect, and comfortable having jiggly bits that people see, which has made me stronger. And those are the kind of spaces I want to create for other people.
I think that what you're saying, though, and the more often I say I don't know, the more comfortable I am saying I don't know. But even listening to you with what you're describing, it's like these small acts of vulnerability over time is what makes us, I believe, more comfortable with uncertainty. It's like the more I'm able to be myself, like what you're describing, the more I'm able to show you, these are things that I feel shame around. And the fear, I think, internally is that you the receiver of that information run for the hills and go, oh my goodness, well, my opinion's completely changed of you. I thought you were this, and now I realize you're that, you're trash, and I never want to speak to you again. That's the fear, I think, that we carry around the parts of ourselves that, and again, a scale of everything from shameful to less than ideal. And every time I'm willing to be imperfect, which is vulnerability, every time I'm willing to show you some part of myself that I deem as, less than ideal, and your reaction is somewhere in the, in the realms of, okay, thanks for sharing, or I can relate to some aspect of what you said, or that must have been hard, or any response that falls into it's okay, the more confidence I have in who I am, the more willing I am to share who I am, and the less of a challenge. I believe that this is connected to the I don't even know if less of a challenge is the right word, but the more comfortable I become with uncertainty. Like, as I become more comfortable with who I am, I also somehow become a little more uncomfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah, I think because maybe it's age, I don't know, but the jig is up, right? Like, oh, right, we don't know the future. It's unpredictable. That's what makes it so freaking exciting, because it's not a straight line. And I often, when I coach someone, well, you know how I feel about goals, but people are like very committed to having a goal, which is fine, whatever. If your goal is to run a marathon or to do this or something tangible, yay. But a life goal, I could get some pushback here, but a life goal is only from the level of consciousness that you're at. You can only see as far as you can see. And I think that something I was saying, different levels of knowing, different levels of consciousness. Like, we can only see the world from our perspective. And as we move through our life or our day or the moment or whatever, even reading a book, we are opening ourselves up to new perspective. And we leave a conversation, leave an experience, leave a era, leave a decade, leave a year, whatever, new, changed. And the more I see that, the more I recognize how these old patterns or masks, which this podcast was talking about, the person on the podcast was brilliant, by the way. But the word mask was bothering me enough to bring it up today, I guess. But it's like, just that was the identity that kept me safe in that time in my life. It might have been a week ago, a day ago, an hour ago, or 10 years ago. That part of me needed to show up to be safe. And now I can move that part of me to the back of the bus. And I think about values and my core values. Like, our values change over time. Yes. People always ask, do they change over time? Yes, they do. They change over time because our needs change, and therefore our motivations change. But also, some of our like core values of who we are remain constant, but the context and the way we experience them broadens. For example, my two core values that show up all the time are safety and fairness. And safety in my younger years, up until last week, no, I'm just kidding, but safety was really directed at me feeling safe, because I didn't feel safe in my life. There's been experiences that I didn't feel safe. Everyone has that. I'm not unique. But so safety, I created safety, and I lived my value of safety by lashing out, by keeping people away, by having a quick wit, by reading lots of books, by having lots of knowledge. And now safety, the value of safety, I express it by creating spaces for others to feel safe. Rather, it's a shifted in its focus from my safety to our safety, to creating that psychological safety. And like with fairness, it used to be fairness according to me. And now I've broadened my value of fairness according to a broader definition of what's fair, because it's very jiggly and messy and uncertain and broad.
I love that you brought safety up, because I think that is what vulnerability does. I think that vulnerability allows us to feel more safety with ourselves internally. I'm not suggesting if we're in a dangerous situation where someone's running after us, that makes a difference. But I think day-to-day life, as we show up in the world, we had this concept around vulnerability and its ability, or the way in which it creates intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Janet Atwood that first put this into my head. And I don't think from a etymology perspective it's accurate, but intimacy, and she would say, into me see.
Oh yeah,
Intimacy, into me see. So I allow you to see into me. And vulnerability is really what creates intimacy in relationship with others. Like I was talking about before, I say to you, this is a less than what I presume to be desirable part of myself. You say some version of that's okay. And the more that happens, the more I'm willing to say, I don't know, the more I'm willing to say, I don't know about this aspect of myself. And as the vulnerability grows, the safety with ourself, I think, grows. And that's what Philip said, the more confidence I have, the more I am able to substitute curiosity for fear of the unknown. I agree. And the safer I feel with me, the more okay I am feeling less external safety, I think, is what I perceive to be true.
And I wonder if we accept ourselves more with the risks. I think it's relative to the risks we take, because the more risks we take, we open ourselves up to failure, to learn, to grow, to have success, and so I think the journey to loving myself more has been just kind of laughing at tragedy. Like, oh, wow, I remember when that would have humiliated me, and now I don't need to know the answers anymore. I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm rambling, but I feel like there's some nugget in there I'm going to think about, because I think it's all the knowledge that I have put into my brain. And a friend of mine just became my roommate, and she's just amazing. And I have this bookshelf. I have a few bookshelves. She's like, have you read all those books? I'm like, yeah. I mean, I have lots of knowledge, people, but I'm just now turning it into wisdom. Like, I'm now understanding why I was so hungry for knowledge, was to more be seen as having it all together and someone people rely on. But now that it's wisdom, not only can you rely on me, but you can trust me, and you can be authentic, and you can be vulnerable, because I can be that back to you, because I've got more experience in my life. And I don't know if it's parallel to age. I don't know about that. It's more just like, I've taken lots of risks in my life. I've done lots of super cool things, and I've been massively humiliated and massively admired, all that, which brought me to being more comfortable with myself. It's like being honest with myself. Like, I don't know what the answer is to that. I'll try that. Let's just, who cares if I don't know? How could I learn if I don't try? And it's about embracing, for me, just the flaws that I have. And is this every day? Do I feel it's like this every day? No, because I'm just right in the zone right now, feeling like, oh, I'm feeling so conscious and zen-y, and because I love having these conversations with you, and I love the interaction. And I could get totally triggered in 20 minutes. But what's true is I can notice it, and I can say, okay, what's happening right now? I'm not being present to the moment. I'm fearing a future, or I'm fearing something that really isn't happening right now. That is the learning. It's not that we get triggered, or we feel off our game, or we feel vulnerable, or afraid of the unknown. It's like, how can we notice it and say, that's cool, you got this. We all lose our shit sometimes. Anyway, that's where my brain.
I had a interesting conversation in the car yesterday with my youngest son, and I had a moment of feeling very proud as a mum, because we were talking about something, and he said to me, he was talking about a friend and his friend's parents, and he said to me, the thing is, Mum, some people just find it difficult to accept that everyone is wrong sometimes. And I was right. That's right. Everyone is wrong sometimes. And then we moved a little further down the conversation, and we were having a good conversation. He said, I love you, even though sometimes you're really annoying. And I said, yeah, that's okay. And he said, it is okay, because I'm annoying too. In fact, everyone is annoying some of the time.
That's good.
Said, that's right. Everyone is wrong some of the time, and everyone is annoying some of the time. And these are just aspects of being a human, having a human experience. but I felt quite proud that my 15-year-old reflected those things
I love that.
back to me. Yeah.
I love that. So when we're talking about today, we talk about vulnerability, authenticity, and uncertainty. And what's true, I think, what's true is like, it's uncertain every day. We don't know how it's going to end, if it's going to end, what's going to show up, what's not going to show up. So how can we engage with that with more authenticity and vulnerability, and just open ourselves up to saying, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. And what was I expecting? And what about that expecting would have made me feel safer than what happened? And what's true is I survived what happened because I'm here thinking about it. and so we make it through things. And I think if anyone's familiar with the Kolb, K-O-L-B cycle of learning, I love it. And I use it in all my trainings, and I try to use it in my own reflective practice of, planning for action, taking the action, reflecting on the action. And it's the key is reflecting what happened. I like this. I don't like this. Or what happened that I expected? What happened that I didn't expect? Oh, that's really curious. And what am I going to do next time if this happens? And what have I learned? Like really applying that learning just to get more view of ourselves.
And I think that curiosity, it was mentioned a number of times in the chat by people, this idea of being curious when feeling uncertain. And one of the things that I find helps is, like you said, we're having this very wonderful, elevated, interesting conversation. I don't feel triggered right now in this moment, but who's to say half an hour's time, what could happen when I get off this call? And one of the things I like to remind myself when that happens, because of that nervous system activation piece, is everything is okay in this moment. Everything is okay in this moment, because what's true is I'm usually catastrophizing into the future. Oh my God, I'm uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen. This could happen. That could happen. Now I'm imagining, I think, again, someone said in the chat, why is it the things I imagine in the future are always catastrophic? That wasn't your word. It's my outcomes. But if I can pull myself back into, whether it's even in this second, everything is okay in this second. Everything is okay in this breath. Everything is okay in this moment. And then I can move to a place of where I can become a curious problem solver, if that's what I want to do, because I'm calming my body down to a place where now, okay, I don't know what to do, but let me wonder about how, maybe I need to ask other people. Maybe I need to have a conversation with someone. Maybe I need to bring a team together if I have a team. Maybe I need to write everything down on a giant piece of paper so I can take it out of my brain and see it in front of me and realize that instead of the million things I think it is, it might actually just be 10 things.
Right. Yes, I had a couple of things go through my head that are completely off topic.
Okay.
So first thing is this friend of mine who sold her house and moved here. People would say to her, wow, that's a big decision, or leaving your job to become a coach. That's a big decision. There are big decisions that we make, but I really was analyzing this. And it's like, the big decision could be made because of all the small choices and things that we did leading up to the moment where it seems like that's a big decision. Like, in all true fairness, we started talking about her moving a year ago. I personally want to move to DC. I've been talking about that for, a year now, Natalie, because it's going to happen. I'm making it happen. But it's like, that may seem like a big decision from the outside in, but we do little things each day in our thought processes, in the things that we do, the actions we take that move us towards this big decision that may seem that's big and unknown, but we built the capacity to make it with the little choices, the little things along the way. So think about all those little moments where you reflect and you learn. You say, oh, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but it's this. And what did that open up? And all those little micro learnings in your day, your week, your month, your year contribute to sort of these big next steps that may seem like they're out of the blue. I know it's completely unrelated to our topic, but that was something I was thinking about. The other thing I wanted to share is, this is for all you trainers out there. I learned something yesterday on a call. I was I'm on this course, and this was the most interesting thing, because I think learning and reflecting on your learning is the most powerful thing we can do I'm going to tie it into to cope with uncertainty, to be vulnerable and authentic. Is the suggestion was partway through a training, a workshop, halfway through the day or partway through the morning, stop, divide the team or the group into small groups and say, each group, you need to come up with 20 things that you just learned. and it's like you're forcing people to look at what just happened. How present were you to that? And then not only their own experience, but the experience of others. So you're learning collectively, you're learning other people's perspectives. I'm going to try that next week with the team I'm working with in DC. But I wanted to share that because I know a lot of people on this call are trainers and coaches. But I like that. Just stop time, do a check, a temperature check, and then move on back in. Don't analyze it. Just say, okay, thanks, move on. So you're teaching people to learn. And if we do that in our lives, we can track where a big decision came from, because it doesn't just out of the blue say, oh, I'm going to sell my house and quit my job and move to another province. Anyway, I am not sure why I needed to say those things, but I felt the need. So that is my wrap. What is your wrap, Natalie?
My wrap is I feel like I want to continue the pursuit of ongoing vulnerability in my life. As I reflect, as you're saying, as I reflect on it through our conversation, I see how vulnerability has made all of my relationships better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with you and our team, with my kids, with my partner, with my family. The more I am, this is very poetic, courageously willing to stand in the truth of who I am, are the words that come to me, the more safety I internally experience, and the more comfort that gives me with a lack of certainty around me. So that's my wrap.
I love it. I love it. And I want to appreciate all of you who are watching later. Feel free to give us any feedback. And that was fun. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. We're doing a couple more of these, and stay tuned. And thanks for engaging and participating and playing along. So have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.
For the hearts. All right.